when it comes to leadership, again, like we've always mentioned, it has to come from the top down, especially when you're really trying to keep that focus of people at
Hmm.
least at equal footing with the process, right?
Yeah.
But the problem is, I see this wherever I go. People who are promoted are generally promoted because they are very good at the process.
Right. Yeah.
They're very good at getting stuff done. So if they are productive and timely, getting stuff done and accurate, they're seen as more valuable or someone who can teach those other folks how to do that.
Hmm.
But teaching somebody and motivating someone to learn are two different
Right.
things,
Right.
right? And so, if we're hiring folks who are really good at the process, but maybe have not necessarily developed their people skills, for leadership, we are in trouble.
Yeah.
And, and so it's something that is really a hard thing because if you worry about process, they need to get this done. You need to get this done. And I don't know what else to tell you, but this has to get done. And you haven't told that person why. Oh, this came from above. We just have to do what they say. Okay, so the why is not there. And you're sending these people out to do something where they don't understand why they have to do it, why it has to be different than before, and what's the benefit of it. Right. And so my intent is to pass along this information, right? But my
Hmm.
impact is you're not taking accountability for knowing why this is important or for selling us on that importance. And a lot of people say, why should I have to sell somebody on something to do their job? Because you do.
Hmm.
If we do not know why we're going to do something, our brain will resist it, whether you like it or not, right? Because I said so does not work for folks over the age of 12. And you're lucky if you get to 12, right?
Hmm.
So, that's something that you have to recognize. And this isn't something that we came up with, folks in our age group, in our generation came up with, we were told to get it done. And it has to get done because that's the part of the policy. And we learned how to deal with it. But this generation, they want to know why. They want to know why. They want to know what's in it for me. And if you're not selling them on the benefit of it or why they're doing it, they're going to find somewhere else to work, somewhere that pays the same, if not better, some place that has, long-term opportunities for them to learn and grow. Because I said so is the end point of growth,
Yeah.
right?
Well, and I
So
think, yeah, and I think that's the big difference between like managing and leading, right?
yeah,
We keep using the word leader. Like managing people is all about the work. It's the process part of it. Like what needs to get done, when does it need to get done, how does it need to get done, how are we going to get it done, who's going to get it done. That
right.
is very much for me a management perspective, right? We're looking at the bottom line, we're looking at outcomes, we're trying to meet these outcomes, stay within our budget, all of those things. Very important work. But it doesn't necessarily mean it's leading people. It's managing them and managing their time. It's the here's what you need to do and when you need to do it. There is a place for that. And it's a skill set. And leading is different. Leading is managing people, managing their energy, managing their thought processes, helping them feel connected, helping them know why they're doing it. Like you mentioned, it's not about because I said so. I don't know how you are. As soon as someone says because I said so, I become a rebellious 15-year-old
Mhm.
immediately,
Yeah.
immediately, not doing it. I don't even care
Well,
what it is, not doing it.
yeah.
So when we're thinking about like leadership skills, it's very much like you were talking about where people get promoted because they're good at the work, they're good at the process, and that's part of like the skill set. But leading is a whole different ladder. It's like leaving this skill set and leaning into something different. And I think this is what's really challenging for people who are new to leadership or who are new to leading people. They want to focus so much on the process that the people part of it becomes secondary. And that's like where I'm going to say a 99% of workplace conflict comes from is the people part of it.
Yeah.
Very few times is it like, oh, I really just don't love the process. It's, I don't like who told me. I don't like how they told me. I don't understand why they told me that way. That's where like most of the conflict comes from.
Right.
Completely made up statistic, by the way. No data
But it
behind that.
but it makes a ton of sense. I mean, if we are And why are people focused on the process and focused on, being productive? Because that's what they're measured on,
Yeah.
right? They're measured on performance, and what performance is for a lot of folks is how many widgets you're producing, how, per hour, right? And are there any bottlenecks? Is it streamlined? How can we get those widgets produced better, right? And how often is it, how do people, when we are producing those widgets, how are they treated? What are we providing them that helps them to provide more widgets, right? But that's missed. What a lot of people when I used to work for the bank, we created something that was non-financial in terms of being rated. I mean, before the end of the year, promotions, bonuses, merit increases were mostly focused on hitting targets and goals,
Hmm.
right? Financial targets, turnaround time targets for loans, right? Audit targets, all these other things that are specific based off of accuracy and production, right? And so what about the other targets? I mean, if you are working with human beings, what are those other things that are important to be able to be productive, be effective, right? How do we treat people? How do we interact with them? How do we motivate them? How do we keep them engaged? Right? And you can find that. You can find that in turnover rates. You can find that in, workplace comp, right? Hostile work environment, stress leave, right? Those things like that. Those are all people oriented. Even if people are leaving on stress leave because they are, it's too much work and I don't have time, I'm overworked. Okay. But how often is that addressed on a human level
Right.
as opposed to we're all overworked, we got to get it done, as opposed to we're overworked. How are we feeling about it? What's something that maybe you would like to see happen? How about you? How can we make that work, right? It's for people to feel heard, to feel like we actually give a shit. Because if we don't make them feel that way, and we're going to keep, running them at 100 or in the red, what happens when you run an engine in the red for too long? You blow a head gasket, right? And so, yeah,
I would say you see that with Amazon. I don't know if you've heard like most Amazon warehouses blow through the whole local
turn
population in
around.
like 5 years. Why? Because they're
Mm.
focused on, productivity, 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 productivity. And so the people who can't keep up with the pace of the productivity, they leave. And before you know it, they've exhausted all of the local workforce
Yeah.
because their productivity standards are so high. Now, I'm not mad about that because I like getting my Amazon packages in a day or so. But I am saying the people aspect of it is not taken into consideration. And the point I'm trying to make here is that that eventually impacts productivity. So
Sure.
for people who really value productivity and they're saying, but the bottom line here is we got to get the work done. You are right. And the better that people feel, the more productive that they will be. But let's tie this back to accountability, right? Because that's the topic of today, accountability. People who can be accountable tend to be more productive than people who avoid accountability. And what I mean, this is a culture, a workplace culture thing, like highly accountable workplace cultures where people are open to giving and receiving feedback, where people can have honest, candid conversations with each other, where we can discuss issues and challenges, will have more productivity and have more effective processes than people who don't. And so there's like a vested interest in leaders in developing that culture where people can be vulnerable. They can admit mistakes. They can give their honest perspective. They are allowed to give feedback. Um, and we can tell each other the truth without, again, the resentment that comes with sometimes people being accountable to each other. So I have to feel safe that if you and I are working together, Carl, and somehow I feel like you're not pulling your weight or you're inhibiting the process, or maybe you've said something to me that causes me pause to be honest with you, that I feel safe enough that I can trust that I can have that conversation to say, hey, Carl, the other day when you said, I can't even think of anything bad that you would ever say, Carl, but um, remember when you said the other
I'll live
day,
with you.
whatever you said, like I really internalized that. It made me feel like you didn't trust me as a coworker. Like where are you coming from when you said that? And then I'm going to give you an opportunity because as much as I want you to be accountable, I have to also be accountable for, again, maybe how I understood it, how I processed it, like give you an opportunity to share and be willing to take it at face value. But that's really, really hard to do when we're so competitive with each other and we're making all of these assumptions and um, trying to guess your intention versus my intention versus I'm the only one who cares and you don't care and you did that on purpose to ruin my life and you're trying to keep me from getting promoted or all the other crap that we make up about people. Like that is not true accountability. We have to be willing to like have those hard conversations. And I will say sometimes you do and it goes nowhere. Sometimes you have those hard conversations where Carl, when you said that I was, God, I feel like so bad tarnishing your reputation, but you know, when you said Tiff, or when you said to me, Carl, that Tiff, you're too goofy, I really felt like you don't think I'm a smart person. And Carl might say to me, you know what, Tiffany, I do think you're a smart person, but I also think that sometimes when we're having serious conversations, you take it a little bit too lightheartedly. And I feel like you're not taking the seriousness of the topic to heart, where I would like us to have a more professional conversation and not be so silly when it's something serious. And so I have to now take accountability for that. Like, oh, I am a little bit too silly in serious conversations. Maybe I do need to read the room a little bit better and develop a little bit more awareness about what other people are feeling instead of always just, you know, being the goofy one. So I know that's probably a terrible example, but you see where I'm going with that. Like,
No, absolutely. Because I have to
instead
take,
of going, yeah,
I have to
instead of
take
going, no,
responsibility
Carl,
for calling you goofy.
right? But at the same time, I have to own like my contribution. And so we might decide like, okay, how do we want to move forward with this? Carl might say to me, you know, Tiffany, I didn't realize Goofy was going to hurt your feelings. I was trying to just say, you know, this. And I can say, well, you know what? I also can understand from your perspective that I need to maybe take things a little bit more serious. So what can we do for the future? Like how can we talk about this? If I'm getting a little bit too lighthearted, what's a different way that you can share that with me? And Carl might say, and if I look at you and say like, that might be a sign that you're taking it too lighthearted and that if we trust each other, then I know there's no malice in that. And I'd be like, I got it. I trust you, Carl. So when Carl looking at me in the meeting going, I'm like, now he doesn't have to call me goofy because we're both accountable to each other, right? We're both accountable to each other. And that's, I think, where the real magic happens in the workplace versus going, Carl, goofy is my personality. I'm an American. I'm allowed to be goofy. It's my First Amendment right to be whoever I want to be. How dare you tell me that I can't be my authentic self? That's not being accountable. That's the part that I think that gets in the way is that we get defensive versus being open to maybe there's a different way.
So that goes back to what you just talked about. It all goes back to taking it personal and managing our conflict, right?
Right. Right.
So not having trust. If we don't trust that other person, even if we do trust that other person and we still have, you know, the tendency to take things personally, how do we manage that? How do we decide that, hey, did they mean to hurt my feelings by calling me goofy? You mentioned intent over impact,
Mm-hmm.
right? And my intent is to tell you that, you know, we need to be a little more serious in some of these meetings, but I use the word goofy, which is a colloquial term, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, I may not think goofy means anything to you, or it doesn't mean anything to me. It's just another way of saying, hey, stop being so silly or stop
Mm-hmm.
acting like a child. But what if you were raised being told by your parents that you're goofy or acting like a child, right? I have a friend I grew up with, and if she's watching, you know, I'm not going to say your name, but those of us who know who she is, we grew up calling her Dingy. That's her nickname, Dingy. To this day, she's Dingy, right? She's not Dingy. She's highly intelligent, and she's very successful in what she does and has a prominent position at a prominent organization in California. And so she is highly competent and highly capable. But those of us who have known her for 40 plus years, she's dingy. In fact, to our kids, she's anti-dingy, right? Um, but that doesn't necessarily mean that everyone else has the right to call her dingy.
Right.
So when I introduce her to people, I use her name. Everyone,
Mm-hmm.
this is my friend. She's basically, a sister to me as long as we've
Mm-hmm.
been, you know, friends. This is my friend. And when I speak to her in groups of people, I will refer to her by her name. When it's just us, our little group of friends or the extended family, she's dingy,
Mm-hmm.
right? But I have the wherewithal to recognize what's appropriate when it's not appropriate. And she's actually mentioned it to me when she came to a barbecue of mine a while back, and I introduced her by her first name to everyone. And later on, she goes, thank you for introducing me by my first name. Sometimes, you and everyone else, I understand. It's basically my first name now. But to everyone
Mm-hmm.
else, that's, I mean, if we went into her her place of business and walked up, yeah, I'm looking for Dingy,
Right.
right? Why did they call you Dingy, right? So that's that's a different dynamic, a different place. But then I have friends who will just do it in a bar, a crowded bar. Hey, Dingy, ding dong, and all these other things like that, which makes her cringe, and I see it, right? And we've actually had bust ups with friendships, and you
Mm-hmm.
know, because where I've actually taken to defending her right to be called by her first name or not to have her nickname. Like I said, her nickname's Dingy, but she's not Dingy. But whenever,
Right.
if somebody makes a mistake, if I drop something, you know, I'm clumsy, right? But no one's going to say, oh, clumsy, right? No. But if she drops something, she forgets a date at somebody's birthday. Oh, you're Dingy, right? It's so having the wherewithal, the understanding of who she is and the power of your words, right? So my intent is to make her feel comfortable, make her feel respected as an adult. And, I try to back that up with how I use my language, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, where you see this a lot, this might be our first controversial topic. And I
Ooh.
don't know exactly how you feel. I think I have an idea of how you feel about it, but this might be something that might rub people some the wrong way. We might get comments on this one, Tiff.
Okay.
Pronouns,
Mm.
right? And so thinking about how people are being able to identify themselves in the way that they want to be identified and
Mm-hmm.
gender identity, right? And things like that. Um, and so, a lot of people these days are able to express themselves in ways that maybe people were not allowed to socially 30, 40 years ago, right? And so if someone wants to be referred to as they, them, they, their, or if it was she and now it's a he, why can't they be recognized for who they are?
Mm-hmm.
Now, I have people that I interact with who are super, I don't understand why they have to change and why are they changing and blah, blah, blah. And this is ridiculous. And I never had to do any of that before. And what I mostly hear from those folks is I, why do I have to do this? Right. And so we take it personal, right? It goes against how we were raised, how what we thought was appropriate, right? All those different things like that. It used to be, um, I don't know how you were raised, Tiff, but I was raised, if you can't say anything nice, don't say anything at all. I don't think that was part of your upbringing, but because I think you've mentioned that before, right?
Mm-hmm.
But with, these days, kids are taught, have a platform, speak, advocate for yourself. If you see something that's wrong, speak up. Closed mouths don't get fed, right?
Right.
And those things like that. So people have a platform to express themselves and to say how they would like to be recognized and addressed, right? Now, I want to be addressed as Carl, he, him, his, right? I'm a cisgendered male. That's who I am.
Mm-hmm.
If I decided that I wanted to be they or they, I would hope that as long as we've known each other almost 10 years now, you would respect the right to say, okay, so Carl has decided that they want to be recognized in a different way. And the intent is to show that person respect that you have for them,
Mm-hmm.
right? I have someone I work with a lot, and they have, I haven't known them as long as I've known you, but I worked with them a lot during the pandemic. And they went from she and her to they and them on their 50th birthday and announced that and let people know that they worked with, that's how they wanted to be addressed in classes. That's how they wanted to be addressed. And my 52-year-old self will get on a roll and start speaking and extemporaneously go from, not, when I'm talking about them, I will mention her or she. And then I will check myself and say, I apologize, these are wrong pronouns, they, right? It's not because I'm going to get my hand slapped or I'm going to get canceled. It ain't about that to me. It's about who is that person? What do they mean to me? And how important it is for me to continue to have a healthy relationship with them, because the healthy relationship is not just about how I'm feeling, but how they're feeling.
Right.
And so I've had occasion where, I check myself, and if I don't check myself, they will bring it up. Hey, Carl, you used a used a female pronoun. My bad. When they come out of the breakout rooms, I'll make sure to let people know. Why? Because it's my intention to make that person feel comfortable around me and to know that I respect them regardless of whatever they want to be called, who they want to be called, if they want to change their name, which they decided that they have.
Yeah.
Who gives a shit? That's not my name. It's their name, right? And so, and am I going to make mistakes? Yeah. Why? Because I'm not used to that, right? I'm a 52-year-old dog learning a new trick, but it doesn't mean that I can't be respectful in learning that trick, right? Because it's not about me. It's about that other person. And a lot of people who say, why do I have to do this? It's because you're focusing on, you're taking it personal that somebody else has decided that they're taking who they are and modifying it, right? And
Mm-hmm.
why can't they? It's their life. It's their happiness, their idea of respect. 30 years ago, their pronouns weren't out there because 30 years ago they would have been ostracized in society. Somebody would have shot them down. They might have lost a job, right? They might have had families disown them. It still happens, right? But these
Mm-hmm.
folks have more of a platform where it's more acceptable now to be recognized the way that they want to be recognized,
Yeah.
And so, as far as I'm concerned, have at it, man, and let me know. Let me know how you would like to be addressed, and I'm gonna do my damnedest to make sure that I get it right every time. But I'm not going to because I'm human. But I will call myself on my own shit. And if I don't, you call me on my shit because I want you to feel like there's nobody else in this world. You got me having your back in terms of respect. That's how
Yeah.
I feel. Have at it, comments. Let me know if I'm wrong. I could care less.
Yeah. Well, okay. So gender identity, of course, is one of those things. I'm gonna respect whatever. You can tell me, call you whatever. If that's what you want to be called, that's what I'm gonna call you. I might get it wrong. I'm gonna correct it. I want to be right. I've learned so much in just dealing with people. I don't know what I don't know, right?
Right.
I don't know what I don't know, and I learn things all of the time. Um, but it doesn't just come down to like gender identity. It's like communication preferences. It is how people receive information. It is, your own emotional intelligence. It's how you deal with conflict. There's so many variations on what people receive. And when we really think about like, how are we accountable? It is taking ownership of maybe I didn't know. And here's if I personally will call you whatever you tell me to call you, but I am not really great about saying, "Oh, hi, nice to meet you. What are your pronouns?" I'm not one that asks those questions, but if you introduce yourself and say, hey, my name is Alex, and I use they, them, then I'm going to use they, them for you. But I'm not one to initiate that conversation, but I'll
Oh,
respect it. Whatever you tell me, I'm going to respect
yeah,
that.
yeah,
With that being said, um, part of that openness and being accountable too is you being able to communicate your needs and your preferences and not assuming people should just know. And I'm not just talking about
right,
gender identity, I'm talking about lots of different things. For example, I am not a detail person. I am not going to remember the details. I am not going to remember like the dates, the facts, the stuff. And so when people talk to me and they share with me and they're like, "Oh, I'm in the weeds. It was a Tuesday afternoon. The Mercury was in retrograde. The wind was." I'm like, I've already checked out. So if I'm being accountable to you, I might say to you after, a couple interactions and say, you know what, Carl, I really love that you're into the details. I'm really not. Could you just give me like the big picture and skip the details? Because I'm checking out. I have to be accountable for telling you what my needs are and not just assuming that you know what I
right,
need and vice versa. So if I am talking to you in big picture, which is something I'm famous for, like here's the big picture, and you're like, Tiff, in order for me to really conceptualize this, I need a few more details. Can you share those details with me? Then I have to be accountable to that as well to say, let me show up with the data, let me show up with the facts. I think that's the true respect that we show each other is that we don't assume that they think like we think or and we're willing to adapt to what the needs of the other person are. And if that means that their gender identity is has changed and we need to change their pronouns, and we do that. We stay flexible. We meet the needs of those people. If I'm one that's like, I don't like face-to-face conversations, I prefer that we communicate via email, then I'm going to email you versus calling you on the phone. But there has to be like that give and take where we can find that middle ground because I'm never going to be able to please everybody and you're never going to be able to please me in all the ways that the things that I need. But being accountable enough to each other where I can adapt to your needs, you can adapt to my needs. And we're doing it in the way that's in the best interest of what our goal is, our collective goal, because that goes back to the commitment. What are we here to do? How do we find the sweet spot where we're both being accountable, we're all being accountable to meeting the goal, meeting that commitment, and being flexible along the way.
that goes back to expectations, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I mentioned, you cannot hold someone accountable to an expectation that has not been communicated to them.
Right.
So if I don't know that you've changed your pronouns and you have conversation with me, you let me know, oh, by the way, I go by they, them now. Okay, cool. Right.
Mm-hmm.
But there's some people, oh, I've changed my pronouns and I go by, you change your when? No one told me. All of a sudden we take it personal. Right. And some
Right.
people, it's because they don't want to hurt the other person's feelings. Cool. Hey, oh, I didn't know. My bad. Here we go. Right. But I'm also accountable, like you said, if we don't let people know things, then how are we supposed to know? I let people know, hey, look, we have a meeting. Um, just in case if you haven't sent me, in my head, I'm like, they haven't sent me the Zoom. I have a meeting after this. I haven't got the Zoom link yet. It's been planned for a week. Send a quick email. By the way, my email is here if you're looking to send the Zoom link,
Right.
right?
Right.
So rather than, are you going to send the Zoom link? When is that going to happen? Because I could hey, when are you going to send the Zoom link? And that could be my interpretation. And that person reads it electronically as, when are you going to send the Zoom link? Because they're taking it personal and feeling defensive. That might start the conversation off in a bad place, as opposed to, hey, just when you're ready to send the Zoom link, here's my email. Okay, great. I just sent it. Situation's over. Why am I taking it personal that, like you said, sometimes details get missed, big picture gets discussed.
Right.
Sometimes maybe people don't write down, you know, sometimes people are on the wrong platform waiting for something to start, right? Oh crap. Right. So those things happen. We're human. We make
Yeah.
mistakes. To think that you're not going to make a mistake, you are setting yourself up for a huge mistake,
Yeah.
right? So, it's so important. People don't always express their expectations. They don't always let you know how they feel. They assume, we all assume, and
Mhm.
that's the huge thing in communication. Well, I thought you would know this, or I just assumed that you knew my birthday was in, you know, in September because you said it was in the fall. And I don't, right? I don't know, and so those things like that, I just, that's why I asked, are you guys a football household? Are you a pumpkin spice household? Right? I'm not assuming that. And people will assume things because of their own biases, because of their own ideas of what they think is correct. And, it sets us up for failure. Oh, well, I'm not going to, you know what? This person didn't show up for the meeting. They must not care about the meeting. What if they're on the wrong platform? What if they, you know, um, forgot to send the Zoom link, right? Can we remind them? Is that okay? Or are we going to
Or
take it personal and hold them accountable for it?
or maybe they sent it and it went to your spam folder and you've had it the whole time, right? There's lots of things that could happen. I don't know. I feel like part of this accountability piece too is like as individuals being willing to grow and adapt and change and learn from again what you hear from other people. It's not about changing your whole personality or what you believe. You don't have to change your belief system. It's again, how do we create space where everybody can feel safe? Going back to like the gender focused language. It's not uncommon, but it hasn't been uncommon for me to welcome a class to say, "Hey guys, good morning," or "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome, welcome." And that is not. It can be exclusive to some people. It can exclude some groups of people who don't identify as ladies or gentlemen, or it's, "Hey guys." Guys is a male dominated um, language. So you adapt and change. You know what I say now to everything? "Hey friends." We're always friends. Hello friends. That's what I've replaced. I've replaced it. Why? Because I don't want anybody to feel left out, and I'm just going to assume that we're all friends, right? And if we're not friends now, we'll be friends at the end.
Yeah, I say, hey,
So
team. Yeah.
hey team, great,
Yeah.
perfect. Whatever it is, like how do we adapt? Like it's not always easy to change again your language. It's not always easy to change your reactions. It's not always easy to fix your face and have the right facial expressions. But at the end of the day, if we're really looking at how do we create this space where people can come to work and focus on work, and how do we like connect that people part of it and be committed because we've engaged in the conflict and we trust each other, it really just boils down to just ownership and being willing to say, "I've made a mistake and here's how I want to fix it." And I'm also giving you space for you to be able to make a mistake and to own it and fix it in the same way without judgment. And judgment, I think, goes along with accountability. We have to allow humans to be humans without judgment. This is for our leaders as well. Leaders, you have to, again, you're not going to be perfect. Like, be willing to admit when you made a mistake or when you changed your mind or you got new information. But for those of us looking up to our leaders, understand that they're human beings too, and give them a little bit more grace as we're hoping that they give us a little bit more grace as well. Um, and just being accountable to what we can contribute and moving forward when it's not working without the blame, without the judgment. That I think that's the real magic spot.
Yeah. And so to be able to do that, what's the language? What's the approach as a leader? What's the approach you would use to help your staff, help your direct reports feel that trust, that interest in having meaningful conflict, and the want to have a committed team by promoting accountability? What's the approach that you would want to take as a leader?
Well, for me, I'm going to steal another from Cy Wakeman's playbook here, but there's some self-reflection that you can do. The first like great self-reflection question here is like, what do I know for sure? And this means like in being accountable to remove the blame and to remove the assumptions and the stories that we tell ourselves about what's going on, and really get down to the reality of what's happening. So if I see like there's a dip in productivity on my team, what do I know for sure? That there's been a dip in productivity. I'm not making up the story. Oh, my team's being lazy. They've checked out, that nobody wants to work anymore. All of that is my opinion, but it's made up. It's not real. So really getting down to the reality of what's happening, and getting and acknowledging some of the assumptions I might be making. Um, and this includes, what do I know for sure? What did I contribute? What have I done? And what choices have I made that may be part of this decision? Um, the second question that Cy Wakeman offers, which I really love, is what can I do to help? So if I can acknowledge the situation, if I can acknowledge like the reality is that the production is dipped, what can I do to help? I might have to be curious and ask some questions like, what's causing this? Not from my perspective, my assumptions, but to talk to my staff and have open conversations and trust when they say, we're burnt out. You've had unrealistic expectations for the last 4 years. We've been burning the candle at both ends and we're just out of gas. We can't keep producing at this level because we're tired, we're exhausted, we're understaffed, we're under-resourced, and not take that like, well, you've been doing it for 4 years. How come we can't keep doing it? But really here, I'm like, what can I do to help? What are some of the barriers that I can help remove? What are some of the resources I can provide? What support do they need from me as a leader? That might be it. The other thing, that what can I do to help? I might have to change how I lead. I might have to develop a new skill set. I might need to call in support. I mean, there's lots of things that I can do to help, but really coming from a place not of judgment, but of being helpful and being curious about solutions. And then the last question that she offers in which I really love this question. It's the what would great look like? If I handled this situation well, like what would that look like? And one of the reasons I really love that question is because it requires us to get outside of ourselves. I don't know how much you study psychology, but like there's the actor observer difference. So when I'm the actor and it's happening to me, I've got emotions and all of these things. But when I'm the observer, I have objectivity. I can see perspective. So this question makes you get out of the actor space and get into the observer space. And the way that I kind of like pose this to people when I use this question, what would great look like? What would you expect from somebody else? So if I have, like, go back to customer service, if I asked you, like, Carl, if you had an angry customer, what would be the best way to handle an irate customer? When you're not with an irate customer, you might say to me, oh, well, I would first de-escalate the call. I would validate their feelings. I would show empathy. I would try to listen to what they're saying. And from an observer perspective, it's really easy for you to do that, to say what you should do. But when it's happening to you and someone say, you know what, Carl, F you and your mama too, it might be like, oh, I should de-escalate. I'm sorry. Let me show some empathy. I'm sorry you've had to meet my mother. Like this is where when it's happening to us, it feels different. So this question allows you to step out. So if I'm saying as a leader, I'm feeling attacked, I feel like my team is blaming me. They want me to admit I made a mistake. What would a great leader do here? And then you describe it and then you go do that. So it makes you kind of lean into what advice would you give somebody else? Can you live that advice? And so you're not necessarily making a reactionary response, but a very intentional response of what the best course of action is. So for me, those are three very highly accountable questions because it makes you get out of that, like, again, lizard brain type of reactivity, and it makes you really stop and think about the situation. And if you notice, none of that said anything about what anybody else needs to do. Did you pick up on that? It's all about where I have control. It's all about where I have choice and how I can show up as my best self. And that's the piece I think that leaders can lean into. What do you know for sure? Remove your story. What can you do to help? Really think about what support you can offer or what changes you can make. And then again, how can you be great, whatever that looks like for you? Those would be my 3 hot tips. Thanks, Cy Wakeman. Thank you, Cy Wakeman, and reality-based leadership.
I love them. No, it's absolutely true. What does great look like? What does proficient look like, right? Different people, like we talked about punctuality last time, right?
Hmm.
What does it mean to be punctual? I have different interpretations. I have different interpretations of what it is to be a good employee,
Right.
right? I have different interpretations of what it is to be engaged, right? And we have different things, but if I make an assumption that you should know what my definition of engagement is, I'm setting you up for failure and I'm setting myself up for failure to understand you and to engage you as a motivated and loyal employee.
Right.
Right. So asking those questions, it's all part of the coaching process, right? But I mean, asking those questions, what don't I know? Right?
Mhm.
What is it that I don't know? First of all, we have to humble ourselves and recognize that we don't know everything
Right.
and that that's perfectly okay because we have a bunch of subject matter experts that work for us that can fill us in on what we don't know. Right. And how can I help? Right. Whenever I get those questions about after action questions to ask staff after one of the first things, how can I support you in your growth? Right? How can I support you in your growth and learning about this or that? Right? And that idea of, you know, what does it look like? Right? Love it. Absolutely. It's so true. Right? And those are questions, like I said, in coaching, we get to the bottom of things. If we make assumptions, that's how to get out of those assumptions, right? Is to ask questions. Right? But we have to be in that right mind frame. We have to say that, okay, there's something that I don't know, or I'm assuming, what am I assuming? What are my
Hmm.
assumptions right now? What is it that I think this person should know? And do they know it? How am I going to find out if they know it? I got to ask that question, right? And so it's such an important piece when we ask questions, when we get to the the bottom, we get to that root understanding and very often the root cause of what it is that's the issue. And so, I mean, that builds relationships. I'm not judging you based off of what I think you should know. I am helping you grow based off of what you know and what else you would like to not just know, but also resources you might have, time you might need, right? Um, skill sets you might want to build. Bring them to me. If I'm your leader and I want a, an active, engaged, productive team, I want a team full of folks that are set up to perform at their best. So how do I do that? I not perform how at my best, perform at their best. I have to find out what they want. It's the difference between the golden rule and the platinum rule.
Hmm.
The golden rule, treat people the way you want to be treated. The platinum rule is treat people the way they want to be treated. All right.
Yeah.
What's the difference? I'm not focused on myself and reacting based off of my lizard brain thoughts. I am intentionally saying, what is it that they would like? And how do I get to the point where I'm connecting with them at their level, at their knowledge base, at their place of motivation and engagement? I have to reach out of myself. I have to explore and get a little uncomfortable, but it's going to be worth it because that person's going to respect me and see that I'm somebody who actually gives a shit. And those are the
Mhm.
important things. If we are not focusing on that, we're just focused on the process, then we're missing out on the other half of, what people do at work. Because it's the other half, right? How do people improve performance? They improve performance because they know what they're working towards. And they know that if they make a mistake, if they take a chance and they make a mistake, they're not going to get ridden up or fired the first time that happens. They're going to get to learn and be able to improve, right? So, it's one of those things that people are looking for, right? Have you seen the leadership challenge, Tiff? So the leadership challenge from Kouzes and Posner, right? And
Oh
the
yeah, 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 yeah.
yeah. So they do that survey every edition of the book, and the book, the research has been out for over 40 years, and they looked at 150 different qualities of exemplary leaders, and every year they publish their top 20, or every edition of the book they publish their top 20, and so the top four in every edition of the book for the last 40 years have been the same, right? Honesty is number one. They want a leader who's honest, somebody who's competent, somebody who's inspiring, and somebody who's forward looking. right? Who was focusing on not just what we're here, how is this going to benefit us down the road? How is this going to benefit you down the road? So those are the top four. They've been the top four in every edition of the book for the last 40 years. And honesty has been by far the number one. The other three, they interchange places. But number one in the frequency of how people, when they respond in the survey, they talk about that they check off the things that they're looking for. And it's always in, the high 70s, 80s percentile of what people want. They want an honest person, someone who's going to be transparent, someone who's going to let you know where you stand, right? And how do we get that done? A competent as well, not just competent in what they do, right? There's that task-focused competency, right? The intellectual, competency. Do you know our lingo? Do you know, the job, the business, right? Do you have the right skills, qualifications? But the other side, the personal side, do you know how to talk to people? Do you know how to engender trust? Do you know how to, build those relationships that get folks to say, yeah, I really don't want to volunteer this weekend, but if you really think it's important, I'll go ahead and do that because, I love my team. It's worth it, right? It's those little things like that that make a difference, right? Those four things, and we'll talk about them at another time. I'm sure we can spend, that's a whole series in itself, right? To talk about those things. But, honesty, competency, inspiring, and being forward looking.
I know this is not on that list, but can I just, based on some recent current events, like genuinely caring about people? I'm sure you've heard of it, and I know we're about to wrap up here, but I'm sure you've heard of the Wells Fargo employee that was found dead after 4 days of being on the job, that was literally deceased in her cubicle for I don't know how many days, 4 days before someone noticed. Accountability includes like checking up on people and making sure that they're okay. I don't mean to laugh. Again, that's the goofy in me coming out. Like it's a tragedy. It's a tragedy, and it makes me so sad for humanity that someone can be so invisible in their workplace that they can be deceased and nobody noticed. Like being accountable includes caring enough about people to check up on them and make sure that they're okay, and connecting and being trustworthy enough to be able to do that. Because that is, to me, Wells Fargo shame. I mean, again, I don't know all of the details. What do I know for sure? I know somebody sat at their desk and was deceased for 4 days and nobody noticed. That to me is horrible. I can't, there's not a word to describe how awful that is.
No, I agree. And I think that's part of the competency of leadership, right? Empathy, right?
Right.
Do you have my best interest in mind? Do you care?
Yeah.
And if you care, you are checking up on me. You are interested in who I am outside of the workplace, right? You're interested in how I'm feeling, what's going on, right? And so it's definitely that's a huge competency, I would say, so
yeah. And part of that is being accountable for the culture that you create in your workplace, because a culture of people who work in a building who don't know each other, or like alive or dead, is pretty telling.
Yeah. And like we said, culture is going to be created whether you intentionally create it or you don't.
Yep.
It's going to happen. It's going to happen whether you like it or not. So what you going to do?
Yep.
Sound like
So I've got some questions.
What you going to do? All right.
Yeah, what you going to do? So I've got some questions. I've got some points to ponder here for the end. So one of the first questions I have is, what does accountability mean to you? So really thinking about, like, what does it mean? How do you interpret it? What does it look like in your own life? The second question I have is, how can you be more accountable in your life? So where are some things where maybe stop pointing the finger and taking some ownership over your choices and what you contribute, what you do, what you don't do? So how can you be more accountable? And my third and last question is, where can you let go of intention and really acknowledge impact? Those are my three questions for today.
Okay. And as I mentioned at the top of podcast, those questions, they're in the video form of the podcast, but they'll also be up on our Facebook and IG pages. So everyone, I know that sounded really weird the way I said it, but that's okay. Right. But yeah, so just, go ahead and answer those questions, right? We are always looking for comments. If you make a comment, if you have a question, um, you know, don't be surprised if it doesn't get brought up in a in a episode coming to you soon. So, this is definitely something where, it's two people who are passionate about communication, leadership, and team building. But, we want to build a community of folks who are interested in this in whatever walk of life that you are in. And so, we learn from you all just as much as anybody learns from us. So, those questions are just meant to be thought provoking, to be introspective, and to, like I said, build a knowledge base where we all can share. And now we have a place to share them because we'll be on Facebook or IG. So,
Thanks, Carl. Thanks for that.
no problem.
I
And
can always
so,
count on you.
well, yeah, that's definitely an expectation that I try to set. So I have to pull my end of the bargain, right? So, all right. Well, thank you very much for joining us, and stay tuned for this episode popping up and more to come. And until then, I'm Carl,
And I'm Chance.
and keep it real.
Keep it real.